Welcome. You're about to discover something that will completely change how you perceive silence and how you understand rest itself. For centuries, we've been told that jungles are chaotic, dangerous, and overwhelming. But what if I told you that jungle soundscapes are scientifically proven to be among the most relaxing natural environments on Earth? Not despite their complexity, but because of it. Here's what will blow your mind. A study conducted by Dr. Trevor Cox at the University of Salford in 2017 demonstrated that biophilic sounds containing natural biological variation, like jungle ambience, activate the parasympathetic nervous system within just 3 minutes of exposure. Your body literally shifts into a relaxation state faster than it does with traditional white noise. This isn't pseudoscience. This is measurable, physiological change happening in your brain right now. Before we dive deeper, I want to know, where are you listening to this from? Drop your country and the time in the comments below. And if you're finding this helpful, please like and subscribe. It takes just one click, and it helps other people discover what jungle science can teach us about rest and well-being. Now, think about what you're actually hearing when you listen to a jungle. It's not just random noise. It's an orchestra. It's a communication network. It's a living system that's been perfecting the art of harmony for 65 million years longer than humans have walked upright. Your ancestors spent 99% of their existence in environments much more like jungles than cities. Your nervous system was literally built for these frequencies. When you listen to authentic jungle sounds, you're not experiencing something foreign. You're remembering something ancient and deeply true about what your body needs to rest. Here's the revelation sandwich. You've probably tried to fall asleep to silence or white noise. It never quite worked perfectly, did it? It felt empty. But in a jungle, your brain isn't struggling to create meaning from nothing. It's processing a rich, layered, naturally variable environment that tells your nervous system, this is safe. This is alive. There are no immediate threats. Your sleep doesn't improve despite the complexity. It improves because of it. But the real question isn't why jungles sound relaxing. The real question is, what are they actually communicating? And why has nature encoded thousands of species, survival messages into patterns your unconscious mind understands without you ever realizing it? That's what the next section reveals. Because when you understand the language of the jungle, you'll understand why every creature in it, including you, can finally let go and rest. Stay with me. Let's establish the foundation. When biologists talk about the jungle, they're usually referring to tropical rainforests, the most biodiverse terrestrial ecosystems on our planet. But here's what most people don't understand. The jungle isn't disorganized chaos. It's perhaps the most intricately organized system in nature. Think of it like a city. A modern city has zoning laws, building codes, and traffic patterns. A jungle has vertical stratification. The canopy layer, that's the dense roof of leaves and branches, 150 feet above the ground, operates in an entirely different world than the understory, which is different from the forest floor, which is different from the root system below. Dr. Nalini Nadkarni, a leading forest ecologist at the University of Utah, made a startling discovery in the 1990s. The canopy layer isn't just trees. It's a floating ecosystem containing 25% of all tropical plant species, thousands of species that never touch the ground. She found entire gardens of orchids, ferns, and bromeliads living 200 feet in the air, each one filtering water and creating microclimates. When she lowered scientists on ropes into this aerial world, they discovered a completely separate rainforest in the sky, unknown to science until that moment. This means when you hear a jungle soundscape, you're not hearing one ecosystem. You're hearing at least 4 simultaneously, each with its own acoustic signature, all perfectly layered and balanced. Here's what will reorganize your understanding. The jungle produces more oxygen, absorbs more carbon, and generates more complex biological interactions per square mile than any other terrestrial biome. Yet paradoxically, it's so efficiently organized that resources are cycled almost infinitely. A fallen leaf doesn't sit around decomposing. It's broken down, consumed, and transformed back into living material within weeks. The jungle has achieved what humans call zero waste. Your body works the same way. When you sleep deeply, your brain enters a glymphatic state, a recently discovered process where your cerebrospinal fluid flows through your brain, cleaning out metabolic waste products. This only happens during deep sleep. The jungle, in a sense, sleeps and cleanses itself continuously. Its very existence is an act of rest and restoration. Now, here's a retention hook. Everything you're about to hear follows from this single principle. The jungle doesn't resist its own nature. It flows with it. Every creature, every plant, every process follows rhythms that were established millions of years ago. Think of it like music. You can have silence, or you can have noise. But what creates peace? A symphony. Because in a symphony, every instrument has a role. Some notes are high, some low, some loud, some soft. But they're all part of the same composition. The beauty isn't in any individual instrument. It's in the harmony. Dr. E.O. Wilson, the renowned biodiversity researcher from Harvard University, spent decades cataloging jungle species. He discovered something profound. The more biodiverse an ecosystem, the more stable it is. Diversity isn't a liability. It's nature's insurance policy. A monoculture forest of only one type of tree is fragile. A jungle with thousands of species is resilient. Your sleep works the same way. When your sleep is diverse, moving through light sleep, deep sleep, and REM sleep, you're resilient. Your nervous system has multiple tools. When your sleep is shallow or monotonous, you're fragile. You wake easily. You feel unrest. The jungle teaches us that complexity, properly organized, creates peace rather than destroying it. Chaos is disorganized. The jungle is precisely organized chaos. This brings us to something that will transform how you think about rest itself, the rhythm. Because the jungle doesn't rest randomly. It rests by schedule. Here's a question that might seem simple, but carries profound implications. Why does a jungle sound different at different times of day? The answer reveals something extraordinary about how life organizes itself. A rainforest operates on what scientists call temporal niche partitioning. This means that different species are active at different times, not by accident, but by design. During the day, you hear birds, insects in the upper canopy, and the continuous activity of creatures adapted to bright light. As dusk approaches, the entire acoustic profile shifts. The day birds go silent. The night insects and creatures begin their symphony. Dr. Hans Stracke, a neuroscientist at the University of Munich, has extensively studied how animals perceive and respond to circadian cycles. He discovered that this isn't just about behavior, it's about neurochemistry. Every creature in the jungle has internal biological clocks synchronized to day-night cycles. When this synchronization breaks down, which happens to humans in modern cities, sleep disorders, depression, and metabolic dysfunction follow. But here's what will blow your mind. The jungle's soundscape is specifically organized to help reset your internal clock. Think of it like this. Your body is a radio receiver. It's constantly tuned to the environment around you, listening for signals about whether it should be alert or resting. In a city, the signals are chaotic and contradictory. Traffic noise at midnight, bright lights at 3 a.m., silence at noon. Your radio is getting static and can't find the station. In a jungle, the signals are clear and consistent. During the day, you hear high-frequency sounds, bird calls, and energetic chirping, all frequencies that signal alertness. As evening approaches, these sounds fade. Lower frequency calls, frog croaks, distant animal calls become more prominent. The temperature drops slightly. The light changes. Your body picks up these signals and begins producing melatonin, the sleep hormone. Modern sleep science has identified something called sleep pressure. This is the physiological drive to sleep that builds throughout the day. Dr. Thomas Dang at Harvard Sleep and Neuroimaging Lab discovered that sleep pressure doesn't build randomly. It builds in response to environmental cues. Specifically, the more your environment clearly signals it's now time to sleep, the more sleep pressure you experience. A jungle provides these signals naturally and with perfect consistency. A bedroom with artificial lights and random noises suppresses sleep pressure. This is why people report sleeping more deeply in jungles or jungle-like environments, even when those environments seem less quiet than their bedroom. Here's a revelation that reframes everything. Silence isn't actually what your body craves. Consistency is. Your nervous system isn't asking for quiet. It's asking for predictability. It wants to know, what's happening now tells me about what should happen next. When it can predict the pattern, morning brings bird songs, evening brings frog calls, night brings deep stillness, your body can relax completely. This is why meditation teachers from ancient traditions always emphasized natural sounds. They weren't trying to block out noise. They were trying to attune the mind to predictable, natural patterns. Ironically, in trying to create the perfect silent environment, modern sleep culture has actually created the worst possible situation for deep rest. What you're realizing is that every element of jungle life operates on cycles. Not random cycles, but precisely tuned rhythms that have been refined over millions of years of evolution. But cycles within cycles within cycles. There's not just a day-night rhythm. There's a lunar rhythm, a seasonal rhythm, a multi-year rhythm. And somehow, all of these nested rhythms create a stable equilibrium. Which brings us to something that will genuinely transform your understanding of rest, the concept of nested recovery. Your body doesn't recover in one big chunk of sleep. It recovers in nested cycles. A 90-minute sleep cycle, a circadian day-night rhythm, a lunar cycle affecting mood and hormone production, seasonal changes affecting metabolism and mood. This is how you're built. The jungle operates the same way. Nested cycles, fractals, self-similar patterns at every scale. This is the principle that mathematician Benoit Mandelbrot identified in Nature Fractals, with the same patterns repeat at different scales. But here's what we're really discovering. The jungle isn't just relaxing because it has sounds or because it has rhythms. The jungle is relaxing because it mirrors the fundamental architecture of how your body is designed to function. When you align with jungle rhythms, you're not doing something unnatural. You're coming home. Let me ask you something. What if the thing that makes the jungle most crucial to your survival is also the thing that makes it most relaxing? The Amazon rainforest is often called the lungs of the planet. But that metaphor doesn't quite capture what's actually happening. Here's what will shift your entire perspective on oxygen. Oxygen isn't just something you breathe in passively. Your body is constantly detecting the oxygen levels in your bloodstream, your lungs, and your tissues. When you're stressed, your breathing becomes shallow. Your oxygen intake drops. Your blood vessels constrict. Your brain and body interpret this as a survival threat and activate your sympathetic nervous system, the fight or flight response. When you're calm and breathing deeply, oxygen saturation increases. Your parasympathetic nervous system, the rest and digest system, activates. This is why breathing techniques are so powerful in meditation and relaxation. Dr. Andrew Huberman, a neuroscientist at Stanford University, has done groundbreaking research on respiration and nervous system state. He discovered that slow, extended exhales specifically activate the vagus nerve, which controls parasympathetic function. Your body essentially codes calm states through oxygenation levels. Now here's where the jungle comes in. The tropical rainforest is the highest oxygen-producing ecosystem on Earth. A single hectare of rainforest produces enough oxygen for approximately 10 people to breathe for an entire year. But it's not just the quantity, it's the quality and the consistency. In a rainforest, oxygen is released not in massive bursts, but in a steady, continuous stream throughout the day, driven by billions of photosynthetic reactions happening simultaneously. The oxygen molecules that were part of plants are now in the air, and when you breathe them in, you're literally breathing in the byproduct of transformation, the waste product of growth. Think of it like this. Every breath you take in a jungle contains oxygen that was created moments ago by living plants around you. Your body detects this. Some research suggests the body can sense not just oxygen concentration, but also whether that oxygen came from living biological processes. When you're breathing air that's continuously being created by thriving life, your nervous system recognizes it as a sign that life is abundant, the environment is healthy, and there's no immediate threat. Compare this to urban air, or even air in a sealed room. That air has been sitting there, becoming more stale, less fresh. Your body processes this as subtle environmental degradation and stays in a slightly elevated threat state. Here's another revelation. Oxygen concentration also varies by location and time of day. In the morning, after trees have been photosynthesizing all day, and through the night, oxygen levels are highest. As evening comes, they drop slightly. This natural variation is actually more relaxing than perfectly consistent oxygen because it matches the circadian rhythm you evolved to experience. When you listen to jungle soundscapes, you're not just hearing sounds. Researchers have discovered that audio recordings contain subtle cues that your brain processes as information about the environment's biological activity. The rustling of leaves, the movement of water. These sounds are frequency-rich in ways that signal to your brain. This is an active oxygen-producing ecosystem. Your breathing actually adjusts often unconsciously in response to these sounds. Your breath becomes deeper. Your exhalations become longer and more relaxed, which means listening to jungle soundscapes doesn't just relax your mind. It actually changes your respiratory physiology. Now we need to talk about something that seems counterintuitive. Why does breathing the humid, CO2-rich air near the jungle floor feel so relaxing? Because, and this is the kind of detail that reveals nature's genius, the humidity, and higher. CO2 in the lower levels of the jungle actually make oxygen absorption in your lungs more efficient. Dr. James Nestor, author of Breath and researcher on respiratory physiology, has documented how humidity and carbon dioxide levels affect how readily oxygen binds to hemoglobin in your blood. In the humid, slightly CO2-rich environment of a jungle, your oxygen absorption improves. Your body gets the same amount of rest from fewer breaths. You breathe more slowly, which further signals relax to your nervous system. This creates a cascade. Jungle environment gives higher oxygen production, gives richer sensory cues about biological abundance, gives deeper breathing, gives better oxygen absorption, gives more efficient parasympathetic activation, gives deeper relaxation. The jungle has solved the optimization problem that humans spend billions trying to crack. How do you create an environment where relaxation happens naturally, without effort? And the answer is, you don't create it. You align with what's already there. But we're still missing something crucial, because oxygen and sounds and rhythms aren't the complete story. There's something happening at a scale so small you've never consciously noticed it. Yet it's one of the most profound reasons jungle environments transform your sleep. Here's something almost no one talks about when discussing jungle relaxation. Smell. You can't experience a jungle through a screen. You can hear it, even see it, but you can't smell it. And that smell, that combination of wet earth, decomposing vegetation, living plants, and countless microbial processes, is doing something to your brain that we're only beginning to understand. When you breathe in a jungle, you're inhaling what are called phytoncides. These are volatile organic compounds released by plants, particularly trees. Phytoncides are essentially the plant's chemical signature. They're antibacterial, antifungal, and they serve as communication molecules between plants. Here's what will change how you think about forest bathing. In the 1980s, Japanese researchers coined the term Shinrin-yoku, which translates to forest bathing. Dr. Ching Li at the Nippon Medical School in Tokyo conducted rigorous studies on what happens when people spend time in forests. He measured cortisol, the stress hormone, heart rate, blood pressure, and immune function. The results were profound. After just 20 minutes in a forest, cortisol dropped by 16%. Heart rate decreased. Immune function improved specifically. The number of natural killer cells, which fight cancer and infection, increased significantly and remained elevated for up to 30 days after a single forest visit. But here's the crucial discovery. This immune boost doesn't happen if you visit a forest wearing a gas mask. It doesn't happen if you hear forest sounds, but are in an urban environment. It requires actually breathing the phytoncides. When phytoncides enter your nasal cavity, they activate your olfactory system. Your olfactory nerve doesn't just process smell, it directly connects to your limbic system, the ancient part of your brain that controls emotions, memory, and the autonomic nervous system. This is the most direct path from sensory input to emotional state in your entire body. Think of it like this. When you see something scary, the information has to go through your thalamus, get processed by your visual cortex, then get interpreted by your prefrontal cortex, and finally signal your amygdala to activate fear. But when you smell something, particularly plant-based chemical signals that your ancestors encountered for millions of years, those signals go almost directly to your amygdala and limbic system. Your body responds before your conscious mind even registers what happened. The jungle isn't just relaxing. It's chemically relaxing. Your brain, encountering phytoncides that signal healthy living forest, automatically produces parasympathetic activation, lower cortisol, and higher levels of relaxation-promoting neurochemicals. Dr. Seiji Takeda at the Chiba University School of Medicine identified specific phytoncides, particularly alpha-pinene and limonene, that, when inhaled, increase parasympathetic nervous system activity. These chemicals are released by coniferous trees, many tropical plants, and particularly by plants when they're growing actively. What this means is that every breath in a healthy jungle is a microdose of stress reduction, not psychological, not placebo, chemical. Now, here's where it gets even more interesting. The jungle produces these chemicals continuously. A single mature tree releases thousands of liters of phytoncides per year. In a dense rainforest with millions of trees, the air is literally saturated with these compounds. But there's more happening than just the plants producing chemicals. The soil itself is producing compounds. Geosmin, for example, is the compound that gives soil its distinctive earthy smell, the smell you encounter when you walk through a forest after rain. Geosmin is actually produced by soil bacteria called actinobacteria. Geosmin is significant because your olfactory receptors are exquisitely tuned to detect it. You can smell geosmin at a concentration of just 5 parts per trillion. You could detect a single drop in an Olympic swimming pool. Your ancestors needed this ability because it signaled water availability, fertility, and vegetation abundance. When you smell geosmin, your nervous system receives a deep, ancient signal. There is water here. There is life here. There is abundance. This explains something profound. Why do people report sleeping more deeply after rain in a forest? It's not just the humidity or the sound. It's that the rain triggers massively increased geosmin production. The soil is literally telling your body, everything is fertile, everything is growing. You can rest now. Your resources are secure. Modern humans sleep worse after rain in cities because the geosmin is there, but the urban environment contradicts the message. Your brain gets a message of fertility and abundance, but sees concrete and cars. This cognitive dissonance keeps your nervous system partially activated. In a jungle, the message and the environment align completely. The chemistry and the reality are in perfect harmony. Think of it like this. Your conscious mind can lie, but your olfactory system can't. When phytoncides and geosmin and hundreds of other forest-based chemicals enter your nose, your body is receiving a message that bypasses logic and speaks directly to your deepest survival instincts. You are safe. You are abundant. You can rest completely. But we're still missing the deepest layer, because these chemicals aren't random. They're part of a communication network, a chemical language that the jungle uses to regulate itself. And when you step into that language, when you start breathing those molecules, you don't just become relaxed. You become part of something larger. What if I told you that trees aren't individual organisms competing for resources? What if I told you they're part of a network more complex and interconnected than the internet? For most of the 20th century, we believed forests were collections of individual trees competing for water, light, and nutrients. Darwin's survival of the fittest seemed to apply perfectly. The biggest, strongest trees got the most resources. The weak ones died. It was competition all the way. Then Dr. Suzanne Simard, a forest ecologist at the University of British Columbia, conducted a radical experiment in the 1990s. She wanted to test whether trees were really isolated competitors. Using radioactive isotopes and careful measurement, she tracked how carbon moved between trees. What she discovered was so surprising that it took over a decade for the scientific community to accept it. Trees were trading carbon with each other. They were sharing nutrients. They were supporting their weakest members. Specifically, she found that trees share resources through fungal networks in the soil. Mycorrhizal fungi, microscopic fungi that form symbiotic relationships with tree roots, create pathways through which trees can transfer carbon, nitrogen, phosphorus, and water. A mother tree can recognize her offspring and preferentially send them resources. Dying trees transfer their remaining carbon to their neighbors. Trees that are in shade receive resources from neighboring trees and sunlight. The forest operates as a single integrated organism. The network of fungal filaments in the soil is called the Wood Wide Web. It's a literal internet, predating human internet by millions of years. Here's what will reorganize your understanding of rest. A tree in a forest sleeps differently than a tree growing alone. A solitary tree has to manage all its own resources, fight all its own battles, heal all its own wounds. A tree in a network can distribute the burden. It can rest. Sick trees are supported by healthy neighbors. Young trees are fed by established ones. Old trees, at the end of their lives, transfer their accumulated wisdom, their nutrients, their compounds to the next generation. The forest, as a network, doesn't experience the individual stress that isolated organisms do. In an ecosystem where everything is connected, where everything that dies becomes food for something else, where resources are shared and cooperation is literally built into the soil chemistry, in that system, you don't have the desperation of scarcity. You have the relaxation of abundance. Think of it like this. Imagine a family where every member has to compete with every other member for food, water, and shelter. Constant stress, constant vigilance. But imagine a family where, if one member needs help, resources flow to them from the network, where old wisdom flows to young members, where nothing is wasted, where everyone rests knowing they're supported. That's the difference between an isolated organism and a networked one. That's the difference between a tree alone and a tree in a forest. Now, here's what connects this directly to your sleep. Your body is also a network. You're not a collection of isolated cells competing for resources. You're a networked community of approximately 37 trillion cells, all in communication, all sharing resources, all supporting each other. When you sleep, your body enters a state where that network can do its maintenance work. Your parasympathetic nervous system activates. Your glymphatic system flushes out waste. Your immune system does repairs. Your endocrine system rebalances hormones. All of this cooperative, restorative work happens during deep sleep. But here's the problem for modern humans. We spend our days in competition mode. Work is framed as competition. Social media gamifies life into winners and losers. Even our exercise is often framed as conquering workouts or beating our last performance. Your nervous system spends the day in sympathetic activation. Then you try to sleep, and your body doesn't know how to switch off the vigilance and competition mode. You're stuck in the neurochemistry of individual struggle. When you immerse yourself in a jungle, or even in jungle soundscapes that contain the acoustic signature of a networked forest, something shifts. Your nervous system starts to sense something different. Your ears are processing the sounds of millions of organisms in cooperation, not competition. Your nose is breathing in the chemical signatures of network abundance, not individual scarcity. Your body starts to relax because it's receiving the signal. You are part of a network. You don't have to fight alone. You can rest because everything is supported. Dr. James Nestor, in his research on breathing and nervous system states, discovered something fascinating. When people spend time in environments with acoustic and chemical signatures of network, abundance like forests, their breathing patterns naturally shift to more vagal tones. They breathe more deeply, with longer exhalations. This happens without conscious effort or instruction. The environment itself teaches the body how to rest. But here's the thing about the Wood Wide Web that really changes everything. The network isn't just neutral. It's intelligent. Trees send chemical signals through the fungal network. They warn neighbors about pests. They share information about what's working and what isn't. The network learns. When you rest in a jungle, you're not just resting your individual body. You're entering a learning system that has been optimizing rest and cooperation for millions of years. Your nervous system is being trained by the environment itself to understand what genuine, supported, networked relaxation feels like. And this brings us to something that will reframe everything you understand about what happens to your brain during deep sleep, the concept of collective consolidation. Because it turns out, when you sleep, your brain isn't just processing your individual memories and experiences. It's doing something more, like what the forest network does. It's integrating and sharing information with the broader network of your cells, your gut bacteria, your microbiome. You're not an isolated consciousness resting. You're a network node going into collective maintenance mode. Here's a question that will feel strange at first. Does your stomach have a mind of its own? The answer is yes. And when you fall asleep to jungle sounds, something extraordinary happens to that second mind. Your gut contains approximately 100 billion microorganisms, more bacterial cells than you have human cells in your body. These organisms aren't just passengers. They're actively communicating with your brain through something called the vagus nerve, a major neural pathway that connects your gut directly to your brain. This communication happens through chemical signals, electrical impulses, and mechanical pressure. Your gut bacteria produce neurotransmitters, the same chemicals your brain uses to think and feel. In fact, your gut produces about 90% of your body's serotonin, the molecule most associated with mood and well-being. Dr. Amarin Meyer at UCLA has extensively researched the gut-brain connection. He discovered that your gut microbiome isn't just responding to what you eat. It's responding to your emotional state, your stress levels, and your environment. And more surprisingly, your microbiome is influencing your emotional state through its biochemical signals. Here's what will shift your understanding of relaxation. When you're stressed, your sympathetic nervous system activates. This diverts blood away from your digestive system. The environment in your gut becomes hostile to beneficial bacteria. The community of microorganisms that support your well-being starts to suffer. Meanwhile, stress-loving bacteria, the ones that thrive in acidic, inflamed environments, begin to flourish. This creates a vicious cycle. Stress damages gut health. A damaged microbiome sends signals to your brain that are stressful. Your emotional state worsens. Your gut health worsens more. Sleep suffers. Everything spirals. But here's the beautiful part. This cycle can reverse. When you activate your parasympathetic nervous system through relaxation, through deep breathing, through listening to calming sounds, blood flows back to your digestive system. The environment becomes hospitable again. Beneficial bacteria thrive. And these thriving bacteria sends signals to your brain that are profoundly relaxing. When you listen to jungle soundscapes, particularly ones that trigger deep breathing and parasympathetic activation, you're not just relaxing your conscious mind. You're creating an environment where your microbiome can flourish. Think of it like this. Your gut is like a garden. When you're stressed, it's like a drought. The beneficial plants die and weeds take over. When you're relaxed, particularly when you're breathing deeply and engaging your parasympathetic system, it's like a rain falls. The beneficial plants grow and the whole garden thrives. A jungle soundscape is literally like a gentle rain falling on your gut garden. Now here's something even more profound. Your microbiome is incredibly responsive to environmental signals. Soil-based organisms are present throughout nature. When you breathe the air of a jungle air that contains spores and compounds from healthy soil microbiota, your own microbiome responds. It's like you're receiving seeds from a healthier garden. Modern humans spend most of their time in sterile environments. We've killed off most environmental microbes with antibiotics, sanitation, and sealed buildings. Our microbiomes have become impoverished. This has led to epidemics of autoimmune disease, depression, and anxiety. When you listen to jungle sounds, or better yet, when you spend time in actual jungles, you're exposing your microbiome to the signatures of healthy, diverse, cooperative microbial communities. Your microbiome recognizes these signals and rebalances itself. Dr. Martijn Kool van Wessem at the University of Amsterdam has shown that microbiome diversity directly correlates with sleep quality, mood stability, and immune function. The more diverse your microbiota, the more resilient your body is to stress. A jungle contains some of the most diverse microbiota on Earth. When you expose yourself to that environment, even acoustically, you're essentially inviting your body's microbiome to become more like the jungle's microbiome. Diverse, resilient, and cooperative. But it goes even deeper. Recent research has shown that certain bacteria actually respond to sound frequencies. When exposed to sounds similar to forest soundscapes, beneficial bacteria show increased growth rates and metabolic activity. Think of it like this. Your microbiota isn't deaf. It's listening. When it hears the acoustic signature of a healthy jungle, the specific frequencies of rustling leaves, flowing water, and animal calls, it recognizes the message. We are in an environment of health and abundance. And in response, the beneficial members of your microbial community activate, grow, and send more supportive signals to your brain. This is why people report improved digestion, better mood, and deeper sleep after even brief exposure to natural environments. It's not just placebo. It's not just the stress reduction from being in nature. It's a fundamental shift in your microbiome's behavior. The jungle is literally teaching your gut how to be healthier. And a healthier gut is the foundation of better sleep, better mood, better immunity, and better overall well-being. But we're still looking at this from a bottom-up perspective. How the jungle influences your microbiome, how your microbiome influences your brain. But what if we flip it around? What if your relaxation, triggered by jungle sounds, affects not just your brain and your microbiome, but extends even further into something like a resonance effect that influences the very environment around you? Let me start with something that contradicts everything you've been taught about how your body works. Your heart isn't primarily controlled by your brain. Your heart has its own nervous system so extensive that scientists now call it the heart brain. The heart contains approximately 40,000 neurons that operate independently of your head brain. These neurons have their own memories, generate their own electromagnetic field, and send more signals to your brain than your brain sends to your heart. Here's what will fundamentally reshape how you think about relaxation. The electromagnetic field generated by your heart is about 5,000 times stronger than the field generated by your brain. This field extends about 3 feet outward from your body and can be detected in the brainwaves of people near you. When you're stressed, your heart rate becomes chaotic and irregular. the electromagnetic field becomes disorganized. Your heart brain is essentially shouting signals of anxiety to your head brain. Meanwhile, your head brain is also generating chaotic signals. The two are fighting each other. When you're relaxed, particularly when you're in what researchers call heart coherence, something amazing happens. Your heart rate becomes smooth and regular. The rhythm is like a gentle wave, predictable, flowing. This creates an organized electromagnetic field. When your head brain detects this coherent signal from your heart brain, it calms down further. They enter a feedback loop of mutual relaxation. Dr. Roland McCratty at the HeartMath Institute has spent decades researching this phenomenon. He's discovered that heart coherence can be induced through specific breathing patterns, particularly extended exhales, and through exposure to certain types of music and natural sounds. Here's the revelation: the acoustic pattern of a jungle with its varied but predictable rhythms. Its balance of complexity and order naturally induces heart coherence. When you listen to authentic jungle soundscapes, your heart naturally shifts into a more coherent rhythm. Think of it like this. Imagine two pendulums swinging independently, out of sync. Their motions seem chaotic and conflicting, but if you put them on the same platform, their vibrations will gradually synchronize. Eventually, they swing in perfect harmony. That's what happens to your heart brain and head brain when you listen to coherent natural sounds. And it gets even more interesting. When your heart achieves coherence, it sends a very specific pattern of electromagnetic signal to your brain. The HeartMath researchers have found that this signal actually induces a state called global coherence, where your entire nervous system synchronizes around the rhythm established by your coherent heart. When your entire nervous system is in global coherence, your nervous system is essentially operating as a unified whole rather than as competing subsystems. Your parasympathetic and sympathetic systems aren't fighting for dominance. They're working together. Rest is no longer something you have to fight for. It's the natural state. Now, here's what connects this to jungle specifically. Jungle soundscapes contain what's called 1F noise or pink noise. This is a frequency distribution where power inversely proportional to frequency. Rain, flowing water, rustling leaves, and most natural sounds follow this distribution. Physicist Purbach discovered that 1F noise is found in systems at the edge of chaos systems that are maximally responsive to their environment while remaining stable. It's the frequency distribution of healthy avalanches, of neural activity in healthy brains, of economic systems in healthy markets. Your heart naturally synchronizes to 1F noise. When it detects this frequency pattern in the environment, through sound, it shifts toward coherence almost automatically. What this means is that a jungle soundscape isn't just emotionally relaxing. It's physically entraining your heart into a more optimal rhythm. Your heart brain is being synchronized with the rhythm of nature itself. Here's another profound discovery. When your heart is in coherence, your brain enters what's called alpha-theta brainwave states. These are the states most associated with deep meditation, relaxation, and the borderland between waking and sleep. It's the state where your conscious mind can finally rest while your deeper intelligence continues its work. Sleep researchers have found that people who fall asleep with alpha-theta brainwave patterns show deeper sleep, more REM sleep, and better dream recall. They wake feeling more restored. Dr. Herbert Benson, who pioneered research on the relaxation response, discovered that this state is characterized by synchronized brainwaves across both hemispheres. When you listen to jungle soundscapes, your brainwaves naturally synchronize into this pattern. You're not trying to force relaxation. The environment is teaching your nervous system how to relax through entrainment. This is why people report that jungle soundscapes are more effective than meditation apps or white noise machines. Those tools require effort. You have to remember to breathe correctly, to focus, to maintain attention. But a jungle soundscape works through entrainment. It uses the physics of your own nervous system to create coherence automatically. Your body isn't trying to relax. Your body is being synchronized into relaxation. But here's what we still haven't addressed, and it's the deepest mystery of all. What if this synchronization between you and the jungle isn't just one-directional? What if the way you rest, the coherence you achieve, actually affects the jungle in return? What if relaxation is fundamentally about resonance, about becoming part of a larger harmonic system? Let me tell you about a discovery so recent that most people don't know about it yet. The concept of electromagnetic coupling between organisms and environments. Your body is fundamentally electrical. Your neurons communicate through electrical impulses. Your heart generates electrical signals. Your brain produces measurable electromagnetic fields. You are, in essence, a biological antenna constantly receiving and transmitting electromagnetic information. The Earth itself, the planet beneath your feet, generates electromagnetic fields. The most prominent of these is the Schumann resonance, an electromagnetic frequency of approximately 7.83 Hertz that pulses around the Earth, generated by electrical activity in the atmosphere. Here's what will blow your mind. The Schumann resonance is almost exactly the same frequency as alpha brainwaves, the brainwave state associated with relaxation and meditation. And human brainwaves naturally synchronize to the Schumann resonance when you're in contact with the Earth. This is why people feel so much better when they're barefoot on soil or grass. They're electromagnetically coupling with the Earth. Their brainwaves synchronize with the planet's frequency. Their nervous system calms almost automatically. But here's what makes jungles special. The dense, moist soil of rainforests has exceptional electromagnetic conductivity. The thousands of species of plants, fungi, and bacteria create a living electromagnetic network. A healthy jungle literally amplifies the Schumann resonance. When you're in a jungle, or when you listen to authentic jungle recordings made with sensitive acoustic equipment, you're not just hearing sound. At a frequencies below normal human hearing, called infrasound, the jungle is transmitting electromagnetic information. Recent research by Dr. Rupert Sheldrake on what he calls morphic fields suggests that biological systems generate fields that extend beyond their physical boundaries. These fields carry information about the organism's state and can influence other organisms within the field. A jungle, with its millions of organisms in constant communication, generates an extraordinarily complex morphic field. When you enter that field or immerse yourself in its acoustic and electromagnetic signature, your own biological field begins to entrain with the jungle's field. Think of it like this. Imagine the jungle as a vast symphony orchestra playing at a specific frequency. When you enter the orchestra, you don't just hear the music. Every cell in your body begins to vibrate in resonance with that frequency. You're not listening to the orchestra. You're becoming part of the orchestra. Your body, at every level, your nervous system, your heart, your cells, even your electromagnetic field, synchronizes with the jungle's electromagnetic and vibrational patterns. But here's where it gets really profound. When your body enters this state of resonance with the jungle, something shifts in your consciousness. The boundary between you and the jungle becomes less distinct. This is what ancient traditions called unity consciousness, or what Buddhists call non-dual awareness. It's not a mystical state. It's a neurological and biophysical reality. When your electromagnetic field entrains with the field of a larger system, your sense of separate selfhood naturally diminishes. You experience yourself as part of the larger whole. Modern neuroscience has identified a brain region responsible for our sense of separate self, the default mode network. When this network is active, you're aware of yourself as a distinct entity separate from the world. When it quiets down, the boundary between self and world becomes fluid. Sleep researchers have found that during deep sleep, the default mode network quiets significantly. This is partly why people report feeling at peace during good sleep. There's less awareness of a separate, anxious you. When you listen to jungle soundscapes, your default mode network naturally quiets. You're not trying to transcend your ego or achieve enlightenment. Your nervous system is responding to environmental signals that say, here, you are part of a larger system. The boundary between you and everything else is permeable. This explains something that has always puzzled sleep researchers. Why do people sleep so deeply after spending time in nature? It's not just that stress hormones drop. It's that the individual consciousness, the part of you that worries, plans, and fears, actually dampens its activity. You become less an isolated, anxious individual and more a node in a larger network. Dr. James Nestor, in his research, discovered something fascinating. The electrical activity of people sleeping in natural environments shows more synchronization across brain regions than people sleeping in urban environments. Their brains are operating more as a unified whole. When you fall asleep to jungle sounds, your brain is literally changing its electrical structure to align with the larger electromagnetic environment. You're not just resting. You're recalibrating at every level of your existence. But this brings us to a question that will require us to fundamentally rethink what rest and sleep actually are. If you're entering genuine resonance with a system millions of years old, if your consciousness is entrained with the electromagnetic patterns of billions of organisms in cooperation, if the boundary between you and the jungle is becoming permeable, then what exactly is happening to your consciousness while you sleep? For centuries, we thought sleep was like shutting down a computer. Your brain turns off, you're unconscious. Nothing happens. You wake up, and time has passed. But modern sleep science has revealed something extraordinary. Sleep isn't the absence of consciousness. It's a different kind of consciousness. When you sleep, your conscious narrative mind, the part that talks to itself, that has yesterday and tomorrow, that worries and plans, quiets down. But the rest of your consciousness doesn't disappear. It transforms. Dr. Antonio Damasio, a neuroscientist at USC, has spent decades researching consciousness. He's discovered that there are multiple layers of consciousness, not just the narrative awareness you experience when you're awake. There's the consciousness of your body, the awareness of your physical state without needing to think about it. There's the consciousness of your emotions, your sensations, your intuitions. And there's what he calls core consciousness, a fundamental awareness of existence itself. When you fall asleep, your narrative consciousness quiets, but your core consciousness remains. In fact, in some ways, it becomes more active. During REM sleep, the stage where most dreams occur, your brain shows neural activity patterns similar to waking consciousness. You're extremely active mentally, but in a different mode. Your language centers are offline. Your logical reasoning is impaired. But your emotional centers, your visual cortex, and your sensory integration centers are firing intensely. You're experiencing, but not analyzing. You're feeling, but not thinking. You're conscious, but not in the way you're used to. Here's what will transform your understanding of sleep. When you fall asleep to jungle sounds, your transition into this alternative consciousness is smoother and more complete than it would be in silence or with artificial noise. Because your nervous system recognizes the jungle's frequency as a safe environment for this kind of consciousness. Your default mode network, which usually anchors you to a sense of separate, protected self, can fully relax. There's no threat. The boundaries can dissolve. Think of it like this. A security guard stays vigilant as long as there's something unrecognized or threatening in the environment. But if he recognizes the environment is safe, if he trusts the system around him, he can finally let his guard down completely. When you listen to jungle soundscapes, your nervous system is saying, I recognize this. This is safe. I can let the boundaries dissolve. I can let the individual consciousness quiet. I can enter the larger consciousness. Now, here's where it gets really interesting. Modern sleep research, particularly work on what's called the glymphatic system, has revealed that sleep isn't just about resting your conscious mind. It's about reorganizing your entire consciousness. Dr. Maiken Nedergaard at the University of Rochester discovered the glymphatic system in 2013. During sleep, particularly deep sleep, your brain cells actually shrink, allowing cerebrospinal fluid to flow through the spaces between your cells, clearing out metabolic waste and toxins. But what's fascinating is this. The glymphatic system is most active during specific states of consciousness, states where there's less self-awareness and more openness to environmental integration. When you're stressed or anxious, your glymphatic system shuts down. The cells remain enlarged. Waste can't be cleared. Your consciousness becomes more fragmented. When you're in genuine relaxation, especially when you've entered resonance with a larger system like a jungle, your glymphatic system activates fully. Your cells relax. The channels open. Cleaning happens at every level. What we're describing is a profound reorganization of consciousness, not unconsciousness. A deeper, more integrated form of consciousness where the boundaries between you and the environment become permeable, and your whole being at every level can do the work of integration and healing. Sleep is actually the activation of a different consciousness. And when you fall asleep to jungle soundscapes, you're initiating this transition more smoothly and completely than you would in any other environment. Dr. Alan Hobson, a pioneering sleep researcher at Harvard, proposed that dreams, the primary content of alternative consciousness during sleep, aren't just your brain's waste, like previous scientists thought. Dreams are your consciousness exploring meaning, reorganizing information, and integrating experiences. When you listen to jungle soundscapes before sleep, you're programming the content of this alternative consciousness. Your sleeping mind has been immersed in the jungle's patterns. When you enter alternative consciousness, those patterns, the harmonies, the nested rhythms, the cooperation, the resonance are what your dreaming consciousness will play with, reorganize, and integrate. You're literally using the jungle's consciousness patterns to reorganize your own consciousness. But here's the thing about this alternative consciousness we're exploring. It's not separate from you. It's not happening to you while you're absent. It's the deepest, most fundamental version of you. And once you understand that, once you experience genuine sleep in resonance with something as ancient and profound as a jungle, everything you thought you knew about yourself changes. Now we arrive at the personal application section. Because understanding how the jungle works intellectually is interesting, but applying it to transform your own life is profound. Here's what happens when you consistently fall asleep to jungle soundscapes or spend time in jungle environments. Your nervous system, which has been in a state of chronic low-level activation from urban living, information overload, and constant vigilance, begins to recalibrate. Not slowly, noticeably. Some people report shifts within a single night. Your heart coherence improves. Remember earlier when we discussed how your heart-brain communicates with your head-brain? Well, when your heart achieves coherence consistently, even over just a few nights, your entire cardiovascular system reorganizes. Your blood pressure improves. Your heart rate variability, a marker of nervous system flexibility, increases. But more profoundly, your emotional baseline shifts. When your heart-brain is in coherence, it sends consistent signals of calm to your head brain. Your amygdala, the alarm center of your brain, becomes less reactive. You find yourself less triggered by small stressors. Dr. David Rock from the Neuro Leadership Institute has done fascinating research on how changes in sleep and relaxation affect decision-making. He discovered that just one night of deep sleep increases prefrontal cortex activity the next day by up to 20%. Your ability to think clearly, to regulate emotions, and to make wise decisions improves dramatically. One night. That's all it takes for your brain to show measurable improvements in its most advanced functions. Imagine now, not one night, but 5 nights, 10 nights, a month of consistent deep sleep. What kind of person would you become? Your stress hormones would drop consistently. Cortisol dysregulation, the condition where your cortisol levels are chaotic, would normalize. Your immune system would strengthen. Studies show that poor sleep impairs immune function, whereas deep sleep amplifies it, but it goes even deeper than that. Your sense of self would shift. Remember how we discussed the default mode network quieting during sleep? With consistent deep sleep, your default mode network doesn't just quiet during sleep. It becomes more flexible while you're awake. This means your identity becomes more fluid. You're less attached to your anxiety. You're less identified with your problems. You have more psychological flexibility. You can observe your thoughts and emotions without being completely caught in them. Dr. Bessel van der Kolk, trauma researcher at the Center for Trauma and Embodiment, has shown that nervous system regulation, achieved through practices that activate the parasympathetic system, is the foundation for psychological healing. You can't talk your way out of trauma. You can't think your way out of anxiety, but you can sleep your way out of it. When you consistently fall asleep in parasympathetic activation, which jungle soundscapes naturally induce, you're literally rewiring the neural patterns that underlie your emotional reactivity. Think of it like this. Your nervous system has learned, over years, to be vigilant and reactive. That's a learned pattern, but it's not permanent. You can learn a different pattern: relaxation, trust, and openness. Every deep sleep teaches that new pattern. Now here's where it gets really personal. Your relationships improve. When your nervous system is chronically activated, you're in a subtle state of defensiveness. You interpret ambiguous social signals as threats. You're more likely to get angry or withdrawn. You approach relationships as if you need to protect yourself. But when your nervous system is relaxed and coherent, something shifts. You can actually perceive other people's intentions more accurately. You're more likely to interpret ambiguous signals charitably. You approach relationships from a place of openness rather than defensiveness. This isn't spiritual idealism. This is neurobiology. A relaxed nervous system has better social perception, better empathy, better capacity for connection. And that directly affects your relationships. Beyond relationships, there's your creativity. Here's something that astonishes most people. Deep sleep is when your creativity actually develops. During REM sleep, your brain makes novel connections between disparate ideas. Your visual cortex and emotional centers are highly active, while your logical, critical thinking is offline. This is the perfect state for creative breakthroughs. If you're chronically sleep-deprived or sleeping shallow sleep, your creative capacity is severely impaired. But when you achieve consistent deep sleep, the kind that jungle soundscapes naturally enable, your creativity doesn't just improve incrementally. It transforms. Scientists and artists throughout history have reported that their best ideas came during or immediately after deep sleep. They would wake with a complete solution to a problem they'd been wrestling with. The sleeping brain solved it. When you're falling asleep to jungle sounds, your unconscious mind isn't just resting. It's doing creative problem solving. It's integrating experiences. It's finding novel connections. It's literally becoming more creative, more intelligent, more wise. Here's the cascade. Better sleep gives better emotional regulation, gives better relationships, gives better creativity, gives better decision-making, gives a life that actually reflects your highest values and deepest wisdom. And all of this starts with a simple choice: to fall asleep to the sounds of a system that's been perfecting cooperation, integration, and balance for 65 million years. But I want to address something directly, because I know what you might be thinking. This is all beautiful in theory, but I live in a city. I can't move to the jungle. I can't spend every night in nature. And here's the truth that will liberate you. You don't need to move to the jungle. Your nervous system is asking for something much simpler: consistent exposure to the signature of a healthy, complex biological system. The human nervous system evolved in natural environments. For 99% of human history, the default soundscape was something like a jungle or forest. Your nervous system was literally built by millions of years of evolution in these environments. The modern urban soundscape: traffic noise, air conditioning hum, electronic beeps, sudden loud noises, is completely novel from an evolutionary perspective. Your nervous system doesn't have ancient patterns for processing it, so it treats it as a chronic threat. But here's the wonderful news. You can create a bridge between your modern life and your ancient nervous system's needs. And it's much simpler than you might think. Authentic jungle recordings, particularly binaural recordings, that capture the three-dimensional spatial qualities of forest. Soundscapes can trigger the same parasympathetic responses as being physically present. Not partially, almost completely. Dr. Alain de Strebex at the Université Libre de Bruxelles conducted research comparing physical presence in nature to high-quality nature recordings. He found that the neural activation patterns were remarkably similar. The brain responded to the recordings almost as if it were actually in the environment. Why? Because your brain doesn't distinguish between this is a recording and this is real at the level of the primitive brain structures that control your autonomic nervous system. Your amygdala, your brainstem, your heart brain, these ancient structures don't have a category for recording. They just process. Is this safe? When they detect the acoustic signature of a healthy forest, they respond, yes, this is safe. Relax. Think of it like this. If you showed your eyes a very high-quality photograph of a sunset, your eyes would send the same signal to your brain as if you were actually seeing the sunset. The brain, at a certain level, can't tell the difference. The neural pattern is nearly identical. The same principle applies to sound. A high-quality recording of a jungle activates your nervous system almost identically to the physical jungle. The safety signal gets through. The parasympathetic activation happens. Your sleep improves. This is why so many people report traumatic sleep improvements from using jungle soundscapes, even though they're living in cities. The signal is getting through to your primitive nervous system. The ancient part of you that evolved for millions of years in natural environments recognizes this message and responds. But there's a catch. The quality of the recording matters. Not all nature recordings are equal. Many commercial nature sounds are actually manipulated, compressed, or synthesized. They lack the biological complexity and variation that makes real jungle soundscapes effective. To your sophisticated nervous system, these feel off. They might even increase stress because your system detects the inauthenticity. Look for binaural recordings made with sensitive microphones that capture the full frequency range of real forest environments. Look for recordings that contain 1F noise patterns, the natural frequency distribution of healthy ecosystems. Look for recordings that capture the nested rhythms we discussed earlier. Hourly changes, daily cycles, the variation that mimics real biological systems. When you use high-quality, authentic recordings, you're getting most of the benefits of being physically present. Your nervous system gets the signal. It relaxes. Your sleep improves. Now, here's what multiplies the effect. Consistency. Your nervous system doesn't recalibrate from a single night. Just like physical exercise builds strength over weeks and months, nervous system recalibration builds over consistent exposure. If you can commit to falling asleep to jungle soundscapes for 30 nights, about 1 month, you'll notice changes. Your sleep onset time decreases. You fall asleep faster. Your sleep quality deepens. You remember more dreams. You wake more rested. Your daytime emotional regulation improves. You're less reactive. Your energy increases. Your focus sharpens. Your anxiety decreases. You approach challenges with more calm. Your creativity improves. You notice more solutions, more insights. After 3 months, the changes compound. Your baseline anxiety drops significantly. Your sense of well-being increases noticeably. Your relationships improve as you're less reactive and more present. Your immune function strengthens. You get sick less often. Your sense of purpose clarifies. You understand more deeply what actually matters to you. After 6 months of consistent use, people report that something has fundamentally shifted. They describe feeling more at home in their own bodies, more at peace, more aligned with their deepest values, more connected to something larger than themselves. But here's the thing. This isn't magic. It's not that the jungle sounds are doing something miraculous to you. What's happening is that you're finally giving your nervous system what it's been asking for all along. For millions of years, your ancestors fell asleep to forest sounds, woke to bird calls, moved through their day while hearing the acoustic signature of a healthy biological system. Your nervous system is optimized for this. Modern technology has allowed us to create conditions that bypass your nervous system's needs. We can live in quiet, artificial environments. We can be constantly stimulated by unnatural frequencies. But our nervous systems haven't evolved past their ancient requirements. We're just ignoring them. When you start honoring your nervous system's ancient needs by giving it the signal of a healthy, biological environment, something relaxes in the deepest part of you. A tension you didn't even know you were carrying releases. You come home to yourself. This is what the jungle is really teaching us. Not that we need to escape to nature, though that would be wonderful, but that we need to acknowledge and honor what our bodies were built for, and then create that signal in our lives, even while we navigate the modern world. But before we reach our final section, I want to address the deepest question of all. Because understanding how to use jungle sounds to improve your sleep is practical. But the real revolution is what this reveals about your entire relationship with rest, with nature, and with your own consciousness. For most of modern history, we've thought of rest as the opposite of activity. Rest is what you do when you're not doing anything. It's empty. It's a pause. It's the absence of productivity. This is fundamentally backward. Rest isn't the absence of something. Rest is the presence of something. Integration, healing, reorganization. Rest is when your nervous system does its most complex work. A forest doesn't rest by going silent and becoming dormant. A forest rests by deepening its internal communication. Trees are sharing nutrients. Fungi are expanding their networks. Bacteria are processing organic matter. Animals are raising young. The forest is maximally active, but at a different level. When you sleep, you're not becoming inactive. You're shifting from activity in the external world to activity in the internal world. Your conscious attention is withdrawn from the environment, but your unconscious attention is fully engaged in reorganization, integration, and healing. Dr. Matthew Walker, the leading sleep researcher at UC Berkeley, has summarized what we know. Sleep is not a default state. It's an active, purposeful state where your brain does some of its most important work. Sleep is not the absence of consciousness. It's a transformation of consciousness. Here's what will genuinely shift your life. Stop thinking of rest as a luxury or a necessity to endure. Start thinking of rest as an active practice of integration. Rest is when you become yourself. When the noise of the world quiets and you can actually hear the deepest signals from your own being. Rest is when your consciousness can expand beyond the small, anxious, narrative self into the larger, deeper, wiser consciousness that's always there. For millions of years, humans understood this intuitively. In traditional cultures worldwide, there were sacred times of rest and integration, Sabbaths, seasonal rhythms. Sleep was honored as sacred because it was understood not consciously, but deeply, that this is where real life happens. But modern culture has perverted rest. It's become something to minimize, something to resent. People brag about not needing sleep, as if sleeping less is a sign of strength. This is literally biological insanity. Sleep deprivation impairs judgment so severely that a person deprived of sleep for 24 hours shows cognitive impairment equivalent to legal intoxication. People running on insufficient sleep are making bad decisions, having damaged relationships, and damaging their health, but they have no idea because the impairment includes an inability to recognize impairment. When you understand that rest isn't the absence of life, but the deepest expression of life, everything changes. Think of it like this. A musician doesn't practice music by playing continuously. A musician practices by playing and then listening. The silence between notes is as important as the notes themselves. Without the silence, there's no music, just noise. Your life is music. Activity is the notes. Rest is the silence. Without the silence, without genuine, deep rest, your life is just noise. You can't hear the melody. You can't feel the rhythm. You can't experience the beauty. The jungle teaches this perfectly. The jungle isn't active in the way a city is active, but it's not dormant either. It's moving through rhythms of activity and integration, day and night, growth and consolidation, expansion and contraction. And in that rhythmic balance, life thrives. When you fall asleep to jungle soundscapes, you're not just improving your sleep, you're joining a revolution. You're rejecting the cultural narrative that activity is always good and rest is always a loss. You're saying, I honor the rhythms that have sustained all life for billions of years. I honor the sacred nature of integration and healing. I honor the deepest part of myself that emerges in rest. This is the real awakening that comes from understanding jungle science. Not that you'll sleep better, though you will, but that you'll understand what sleep actually is. And that understanding will transform your relationship with the whole of your life. Your waking hours aren't negated by sleep. They're organized and integrated by sleep. Your work, your relationships, your creative endeavors, all of these are ultimately serving the development and expression of your deepest self. And that deepest self only fully emerges in rest. When you understand this, when you really get it in your bones, you stop fighting your need for rest. You stop treating sleep as a waste of time. You start honoring it as the most precious part of your life. And that shift in understanding, that revaluation of rest, is worth everything. And this brings us to the final revelation. Because there's one last question we need to answer. What happens when everyone understands this? What happens to a society that honors rest the way the jungle honors integration? Imagine a world where sleep and rest weren't things people did reluctantly, in the margins of real life. Imagine a world that was organized around the principle that rest is sacred. What would that world look like? First, workplaces would be fundamentally different. Instead of the 8-hour day designed around maximum extraction of labor, we'd have work structures that honor circadian rhythms. Some people would work in the early morning when their minds are sharpest, others in late morning. Some would have a deep rest period in the middle of the day, the siesta that many cultures traditionally honored. Dr. Roger Eckertsch, a historian at Virginia Tech, has documented something fascinating. Before the Industrial Revolution, most people actually slept in 2 phases, a first sleep and a second sleep, with a wakeful period in between. This wasn't insomnia. This was normal human rhythm. But industrialization required continuous 8-hour sleep blocks for maximum workforce productivity. We actually engineered our sleep patterns to fit economic systems rather than honoring the patterns our bodies evolved for. If we redesigned work around human neurobiology rather than economic extraction, productivity would actually increase, because deep rest increases creativity, wisdom, and decision-making. A workforce that's truly rested is far more productive than one running on fumes, even if the rested workers are working fewer total hours. But more profoundly, imagine how this would affect mental health. Depression, anxiety, and most psychiatric conditions are exacerbated by sleep deprivation. But they're also fundamentally conditions of disconnection from nature, from rhythm, from community. When a society honors rest, when that rest is facilitated by connection to natural rhythms and jungle-like complexity, the epidemic of mental illness we see would decline dramatically. Not because we'd all be sleeping on one issue, but because we'd be addressing the fundamental misalignment between how modern life asks us to live and how our nervous systems evolved to function. Imagine schools redesigned around sleep science. Students wouldn't start at 7 a.m. when their teenage brains are still cycling through sleep. They'd start later, aligned with adolescent circadian rhythms. Classes would include rest periods, not nap time, but guided periods of lower intensity activity allowing parasympathetic activation. Research shows that when schools shift start times to align with adolescent sleep rhythms, grades improve, behavioral problems decrease, and depression decreases significantly. Now imagine this applied to society broadly. An entire culture that understands that the best version of yourself only emerges after genuine rest. Cities would incorporate more natural soundscapes. Instead of the harsh acoustics of concrete and traffic, there would be water features, vegetation, and space designed to create the 1F noise patterns of healthy ecosystems. Hospitals would have nature soundscapes in patient rooms. Schools would incorporate them in study areas. Workplaces would have them in break rooms. And the most radical thing, people would stop feeling guilty about rest. Mothers would rest without guilt. Executives would meditate without shame. People would take sabbaticals without anxiety about falling behind. Because the entire society would understand, you're not lazy when you rest. You're becoming yourself. But here's the thing that really matters. This collective transformation starts with individual transformation. Every time you choose to fall asleep to jungle soundscapes, you're making a choice. A choice to honor your body's ancient wisdom. A choice to synchronize with systems millions of years older and wiser than yourself. A choice to say, my nervous system's needs matter. My health matters. My wholeness matters. That choice matters not just for you. Because when you're well rested, well integrated, operating from your deepest wisdom, you show up differently in the world. You're less reactive, more creative, more compassionate. You make better decisions. You treat others better. You contribute more meaningfully. Your awakening ripples outward. Your peace influences the people around you. Your sense of belonging to something larger extends to how you relate to nature, to your community, to the future of the planet. This is the secret that nature-based traditions have always known. Individual transformation and collective transformation aren't separate. When you honor your own body's needs for rest and integration, you're participating in the healing of the whole. The jungle doesn't rest and integrate just for itself. The jungle does it because that's how it thrives and how it continues to sustain all life. When you rest deeply, when you integrate your experience, when you synchronize with natural rhythms, you're not just serving yourself. You're serving something larger. You're remembering that you're part of a living system that spans billions of years. You're remembering that your body carries the ancient wisdom of forests, of networks, of cooperation, of rhythmic balance. You're remembering that you belong to something infinitely larger and older than your small, anxious narrative self. And that remembering, that authentic alignment with your deepest nature, is what allows you to contribute most meaningfully to the world. Here's what I want you to understand as we close. The jungle hasn't been waiting for you to be perfect or successful or accomplished enough to deserve its gifts. The jungle has been here the whole time, offering its peace to anyone willing to listen. Your ancestors listened. For millions of years, they fell asleep under forest canopies. They woke to bird songs. They moved through days hearing the acoustic signature of cooperation and balance. That listening is in your bones. It's in your DNA. It's in the very structure of your nervous system. When you fall asleep to these sounds, you're not learning something new. You're remembering something ancient. You're coming home. You're finally giving yourself permission to rest the way your whole being has been asking to rest, perhaps since the day you were born. And here's the truth that will set you free. You are worthy of that rest, right now. Not when you accomplish more, not when you're successful enough, not when you've earned it. Right now, exactly as you are worthy of deep rest, of integration, of peace. The jungle teaches this to every creature within it. The smallest insect, the most vulnerable seedling, the aging tree, all are sustained by the network. All have access to rest. All belong. You belong too. You always have. So tonight, when you fall asleep to these sounds, I want you to notice something. Notice how your nervous system relaxes. Notice how your breath deepens. Notice how the boundary between you and the sounds becomes less distinct. Notice how, for perhaps the first time in a long time, you can simply rest without fighting. That's not just rest. That's remembering. That's coming home. That's you, finally, becoming yourself again. And tomorrow, and the night after, and for as long as you continue every time you listen, every time you rest, you're participating in something revolutionary. You're rejecting a culture that doesn't honor your body. You're reclaiming your right to be human in a human way. You're aligning with the deepest intelligence on this planet. Sleep well. You've earned it. And more importantly, you've always deserved it. Thank you for joining me on this journey through the science of jungle rest. Before you drift into sleep, I want to ask one more time. Where are you listening from? What country? What time of night? Drop it in the comments. I read every single one, and your comment helps this message reach other people who need to remember this ancient truth. And please, like and subscribe if this resonated with you. If you found yourself understanding something new, if you felt that shift in your nervous system, share this with someone who needs to remember what rest actually is. The jungle is calling, not to escape, but to come home. Sleep well.